I would like to welcome all of you who have made it on time and those who haven't made it for those who are watching it afterwards. So thank you for coming and for participating. Thank you particularly to Cambria Gordon, who is going to wow us with her book. You see it behind her, you also see it here. Really just a wonderful, amazing read. I'd strongly, highly encourage it. As it really takes you back in time. I was telling her historically, I just felt like it was just so well done, and I'm a historical fiction fanatic. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Some technical, boring details. You will have your cameras and microphones off until after the presentation. Once we start with the question and answers, I will encourage you to open your cameras and your microphones. So please do that. We makes it much more interesting when you can actually see people when you're talking. So we encourage you to do that. I'm not going to talk about the book now because we'll do it in the questions and answers. So let me just formally introduce our author to our New Works Network. Also just putting a little plug there that our co-host for this evening, or this day, depending on where you are in the world, is Yeshiva University, the Schneier International Schneier International Program of the Yeshiva University, and Professor Ronnie Perezes. And also for this evening, it's the Jewish Heritage Alliance and Michael Steinberger. So we're really excited to have them share afterwards also this program. Thank you all for coming. And formally, Cambria Gordon is the author of the award-winning The Down-to-Earth Guide to Global Warming. She has written for the Los Angeles Times Magazine, the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles, Boys Life, Parent Guide News, and Parent Guide News. She splits her time between LA and Madrid with her husband and youngest son. And this is the part of your bio that I crack up at every time, while staying as close as possible to her two adult children without annoying them. Putting it out there that my daughter happens to be here, I'm assuming she really appreciated that line as well, since she's in Jerusalem and I'm in Ra'anana. But really, I know nobody came to hear me speak, so I'm going to turn it over to Cambria. Thank you again for joining us, and I really look forward to hearing what you have to say about the book, and then I'm going to share what I have to say about the book.
Thank you, Drora. And let me just say how honored I am to be a part of the IJE and the American Sephardi Foundation. Thank you for sponsoring this. Also, I send our prayers to our friends in Israel who are going through such a difficult time right now, and our hearts are with you. So I would like to talk about my journey in this Spanish adventure of writing about the Inquisition, historical fiction. So I'm going to share some background of mine, my family background, and show you some photos of my heritage and some research photos and why we ended up in Spain and what that meant to me. And then we'll get more into the plot of the book, and we can ask some questions. Okay, so I'm going to, let me just see if my screen is shared. Sorry for all the tech. Okay. I just want to make sure that this is, Drora, am I, okay, here we are, okay.
There you go, now presentation mode.
Okay. Okay, so I've always had a fascination with Spain ever since I was a young girl. This is a picture of my uncle, Tony Brand, who is a bullfighter. This shot was taken in Quito, Peru, but he also fought bulls in Spain. And I had grown up hearing stories about Cousin Tony, very glamorous, exciting life that he lived. And that started my fascination and love of Spain. Also on the same side of my family, this is my Ashkenazi family. My mother's side is my grandfather, Sam White, who was a film producer, and he produced a film that was a paella Western, which means not a spaghetti Western, but a Western shot in Madrid, called White Comanche. It was produced in the 1960s, so I was a little girl at this time. This film starred William Shatner, who played twins, one a heroic fighter, a Comanche, and one a peyote addicted outlaw, and they were twin brothers. So my grandfather left to spend about 9 months in Madrid. We didn't see him for such a long time, which was unusual and exotic. And I got letters from he and my grandmother, and they told us stories about Madrid. And so when he came home, here was this changed man. He had a mustache and a fedora, and he was super dashing. And I just remember being enchanted by him and by the idea of Spain. He and my grandmother brought us back flamenco dresses. Here I am at age 5. You can see the pianeta in my hair, which is mentioned in my book as well. One of my characters uses a pianeta to self-harm herself. My main character's sister, Beatriz. But this was the outfit that they brought me back. So this was also an example of my love of Spain. Now, on the other side of the family, so my biological father passed away, and my mother married a man who adopted my sister and I and raised me, and from the age of 10 till now. His name's Marty Cohen. And anyway, this is Marty's grandmother, the young woman in the middle. My great-grandmother, Fortuné Gourmet. She is Sephardic, and she is sandwiched by her parents, Esther, and I need to just confirm her father's name, but this was taken in Turkey. So their family can be traced all the way back to the Iberian Peninsula, to Spain. And my father's brother, Neil Cohen, has just received his citizenship to Spain, which they offered to, if you can prove your Jewish heritage, which many of you probably know about that process already. So I wanted to also share that this is Fortuné Gourmet, the young girl grown up, and this is her daughter, Edie Gourmet, the singer. So Fortuné Gormazano was her born with name, her Ladino name in Turkey and in America, but it was shortened to Gourmet. Her daughter Edie, as you may or may not know, is a famous singer. So I wanted to also share that. And too bad, I was going to play a little bit of music behind us of some Ladino songs, but I should have played some of my Aunt Edie's. So I grew up with this Ashkenazi DNA, but this Sephardic culture in the home, the cooking, the Spanish language, the sayings, vaya con leche y miel, go with milk and honey, horas buenas, instead of when you sneeze, you would say horas buenas, things like that. So I really had this mix of cultures in my life. So my family and I decided to take a year sabbatical and learn a foreign language, actually have our son become fluent in a foreign language. Spanish was the winner. We considered Hebrew and French and Italian, but ultimately being in LA, Spanish is an incredibly useful and practical language, an important language in LA. So we opted for Spanish. And then what country do we choose? Well, the light bulb went off. We have to choose Spain. I want to go to Madrid. I want to go back to that place that I had always dreamed of since I was a little girl. When we arrived in Spain, and by the way, I had never been there. I went for 3 days, found an apartment, found a school for our youngest son, and we moved. When we first arrived, we took some road trips, and our first road trip was to Segovia, where I found these plaques on the ground, 3 Hebrew letters that spell out Sepharad. And this was to let Jewish tourists know, hey, Jewish tourists, your people once lived in these quarters, in these streets, in these little areas. It was a tourist attraction, but that was it. There was no museum, there was no building, there was no brick, there was any archaeological remnant at all. So I kept looking, wondering what happened to all the Jews of Spain. I had not studied the Inquisition very much in school, if at all. I don't know why it was not in my curriculum growing up in LA in public school, but it wasn't. So this began my journey. All writing starts with a question. My question was, what happened to all the Jews of Spain? So I started reading all I could, fiction and nonfiction. about the time period when we were living there. And then I subsequently dragged my family to every Jewish quarter I could find. And there was this wonderful Jewish quarter where I started to actually see some archaeological evidence. This is Girona. So this is a Jewish quarter north of Barcelona in a town called, it's spelled Girona. This is a mikveh, and there you can see the water still fills up because the source is from underground. And it's an archaeological remnant, and it's available to tour. And I just got so excited when I saw this. But then friends took us to an area called Extremadora. So Extremadora is between Portugal and Madrid. It's about halfway. So it's a 3-hour drive from Madrid. It translates to, extreme hardness. So it's a harsh region. It's desert habitat. And I learned from our Jewish tour guide, or actually our converso tour guide, who was raised Catholic but had Jewish roots, that many towns during the medieval era were filled with Jews. Towns such as Plasencia, Hervás, Trujillo, and Caceres. Trujillo is where I ended up setting my story. Here's another map of the Jewish communities in this region, and here is Trujillo, where I set my story. Here's Caceres. So this is just a close-up of Extremadura. The Jewish quarters were marked with the plaques as well, but there was more in these towns. These are original buildings, original alleys of the Jewish quarters. They have plaques where marking where Jewish homes were. Here is a home that belonged to UC Casas in 1464. Those were my feet. UC was a character name that I chose, and I made him a young boy in my story. But you can imagine for me, with my curiosity and my desire to find out more, how exciting it was to see this. This, unfortunately, is not that legible, but it is a doorpost on a pharmacy. It is now a pharmacy in Plasencia, but it was the entrance to a synagogue. And these are Hebrew letters, and it says, "All who enter are just." This was also just a treasure trove to find, to see that this existed. And the pharmacist let us in and let us see it. It was really exciting. This is a mezuzah opening, also in one of the towns in Extremadura. Now it's been covered up, but you can see that a Jewish family had lived there. There was a beautiful stream, and I ended up having scenes where my main character and the romantic interest are riding a horse up this stream. This stream connects to the river Tajer or Tigueras, and which leads from Extremadura to Portugal. So that's a big plot point of escape that they use. Here is a clock tower. Now, there were no clocks then, but the church bell rang, and that's how everyone could tell the time. So Isabel, my main character, tells the time for when she wants to go to a poetry reading, for instance, based on how many chimes are rung. These are pelican or stork nests, and I thought that was fascinating. This is actually in the town of Alcalá de Henares, where Cervantes was born, which is also has a huge Jewish population, and Cervantes was supposedly a converso as well. But I just wanted to show you the vibe and the feeling that I was going for with the small town that I set my story in. Here are some ancient wells that are, from the year 1400 and still existing. So the male lead in the book waters his horses at this kind of a well. Here we are with our converso tour guide in Hervás, and in Trujillo actually, and he took us into a home that was once a Jewish home, and you can see this arch. This is below the ground level, and this was possibly a cellar of some kind. but it gave me the idea to set my family's home in this kind of setting where they could study their Judaism in secret and be crypto Jews and also be in the wine business. So this is their wine cellar slash Shabbat room. But this was the inspiration for that. The Plaza de San Vicente Ferrer, which is still there today. So I found it fascinating. It's named after this horrible priest, Dominican priest, who preached words of hatred and incited mobs against Jews. Yet there's a plaza named after him in Extremadora, and he was a very, very important Catholic. So I felt it was important to show this. When I saw it, I was shocked because I read so much of the anti-Semitic rhetoric that he wrote and orated. But that's why it's sort of a gray area when you go to Spain. There's this history that they embrace. There's also a forgiveness and an apology that they do publicly towards the Jews, which I will get to later. And I mentioned in my book, on the 500-year anniversary of the expulsion, the king formally spoke to the Sephardic community and apologized. But yet there is still this plaza, and he was an important person in their history. Negative for the Jews, positive for the Christians. This is a picture of, this is actually a copy, but it was written in the original handwriting of a list of families, Jewish families in 1492 who were kicked out of Hervas and told to leave. So the decree was that every Jew across Spain had to leave in 1492. This was one community's list. I thought that was quite powerful to see. This is the escudo, or coat of arms, of the Inquisition. I think you can find it hanging. This was from a museum, but so there's a cross, there's an olive branch, and there's a sword. And there are Latin words. It says exurge domini et judica causam tuam, which means arise, O God, and defend your cause. It was actually taken from Psalm 73. It's not a bad psalm. It's just about beliefs and this is just some research of some of my many books I used in my research. I hope I'm not frozen. I think my internet is sometimes unstable. This book, The End of Days, and this book down here, Trujillo, were incredibly impactful for me to read. Trujillo was a book that took the court records and the official documents of the town of Trujillo from about 1410 to 1492 and talked about petty crimes like someone stealing someone else's cow or herd of sheep, or a Christian woman who's a widow dating a Jew and how she was punished. Some of them were more grave, some of them were more benign, but it was written in Spanish and English, and it was just invaluable to me in my research. And The End of Days by Erna Perez, she's a Canadian. This was her thesis, her research paper. She's a PhD, and it was so detailed and incredible. That's where I first read about St. Vincent Ferrer, who the plaza was named after. So I wanted to share this picture, my final picture, with my husband and I and William Shatner, whom we ran into on our last day in Spain. He was the reason why we were there, as I mentioned earlier with the film White Comanche. And literally on our last day after our year in Spain, we go to a restaurant and he is sitting next to us. It was like my grandfather had orchestrated it from heaven. And we went up to him, we talked to him, we said, we are an American family, we're from LA, we've been here for a year, and it's because of you, indirectly, because Cammie's grandfather produced a film. And William Shatner said, White Comanche? I was just talking about it. And he started regaling us with stories about the horses, the names of the horses on the film set. And I showed him my blog with the film poster and my picture of me in my flamenco dress. And anyway, it was quite a way to come full circle. And that is it. So I will stop sharing and come back.
Thank you. Really just fascinating. One of the characters in your book that really, I think, fascinated me, in addition to the whole Eva character, obviously, because she's interesting, but her sister,
Eva. So Isabel, the main character is Isabel Perez, and her Hebrew name is Eva.
Right. But her sister Beatrice, I think that's an important character that we often don't see because she is so Catholic. So I'm wondering why you felt that was necessary to add that type of a character. I thought it was really engaging, but what were your thoughts behind?
Well, conflict is obviously what every writer goes for. And to have two sisters completely with different belief systems, and to be under the same roof was a wonderful conflict. I wanted to plant the seeds of worry in the reader's mind that a family member could maybe turn them in. This did happen during the Inquisition. So with Beatriz, who was so fervent and observant and such a believer in Catholicism, wanted to be a nun, very much liked the order and the discipline that it gave her in her life. Entirely different personality from Isabel. Isabel's 2 years older, much more creative, wants to be a poet, worships the poets, does not worship the Jewish sages, does not know a lot about Judaism, but doesn't really question her family's crypto-Judaism and just goes along with it and feels like the duality is fine. It's fine to be converted on the outside and Jewish on the inside. And she just has sort of never really questioned it. And so the scenes between Isabel and Beatrice became so much more alive when you get into the beliefs, into the religion, into rule following, and then you get deeper into rivalry and jealousy, and one sister seeming to have all the gifts where the other one is more bereft. There's jealousy of love, and not for the same man, but about an unrequited love that Beatrice has. And so, and those church scenes became very fraught and interesting, where you had Beatrice, who really loves being in church and wants to have this amazing guest speaker come and guest sermonize, turns out to be Torquemada, where Isabel starts to have these awarenesses and realizations that this is not good for them. So I just tried to really show sister relationship. Isabel is wanting to have a best friend in her sister, and that's a constant disappointment to her. Isabel ends up finding another best friend, but she really wishes it were Beatrice.
Yeah, and but the other important thing that brought up is the fact that her sister could turn her in or turn them in, and that's just such a powerful vision from that time period. Right. But if you talk about visions from that time period, so I've been to Madrid, I've been to Barcelona. How do you find yourself connecting in Spain? Because I felt a great distance between me and there. I felt almost as if, I don't have the words for it, but to me, it was like coming back to a place where they kicked us out. I mean, it's not like it. It is exactly. I felt like the Jews were expelled, and why am I going there?
Well, that's interesting. One of our dearest friends whom we met in Spain, an American woman married a Spanish man, and his grandfather founded the Orthodox synagogue in Madrid. His grandfather is Ashkenaz. No, I'm sorry. His father is Ashkenazi. So he chose to go to Madrid and live because his family had perished in the Holocaust, and it was the only country that did not kick the Jews out. So he said, I'm going to move to Spain, and I'm going to create a vibrant Spanish culture, albeit it's not Sephardic, but I'm going to do this. So that was his reasoning. And I think that a lot of Ashkenazi Jews at that time settled there because of that. It, you know, Franco had this unspoken, you know, I'm going to turn a blind eye to what Hitler's doing. So he was sort of playing both sides. But Jews after the war felt more comfortable returning there. For us, you know, it was all curiosity. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't like, how did they do this? How could they have done this to me? Like, I'm not one of those people who can't go to Germany either, because I want to learn and I'm curious. So where Germany has just gone so far the other way to make reparations, and have so many museums and so many displays and so many mea culpas about what happened to the Jews. You know, Spain is different. It's quieter, but yet there are these Jewish quarters, and the municipalities are really trying to make an effort. And my friend Daniel, whose father founded the Orthodox synagogue, was involved in the rapprochement between the Christian and the Jewish community in Hervás and Trujillo and Plasencia and in Extremadora. And they had a huge ceremony in 1992, 500 years after 1492, the anniversary. And they had speakers, and it was in the newspaper, and it was all about, you know, this conviviality that we are now going to have moving forward. So I personally I very much accept what the king did in 1992 in saying he spoke about tolerance. I excerpt a little bit of his speech in the back of my book. And so I feel that I can live there. We have an apartment there now, and I can love the Spanish culture. Spanish culture is incredible and vibrant and amazing. And, you know, it's a very separate thing to what, you know, happened to us. I will share that that my son, who went to school in an international school, it was 80 or 90% Spanish children, but it was bilingually taught. So the Spanish kids had never met a Jewish boy before. And when he went to school, it didn't come up. We were sort of advised, don't bring up your religion, which was a weird thing, but we didn't bring it up. He didn't bring it up. And then I outed him inadvertently. So he was almost a crypto. He was his own crypto within Madrid. And the guidance counselor, who was my liaison for Cap, my son's name is Cap, and who was helping him just adjust, had said, he's having such a good time, we'd love him to stay a second year. And I just didn't think, and I said, oh, well, we have to return home in a year, he's having his bar mitzvah. I didn't even think, I just said it. It was like a perfect excuse, like I didn't want to insult her why we can't stay another year in her school. So she was doing a presentation around Tres Reyes, which is Three Kings, which is this big holy day right after Christmas in Spain. And the kids were all talking about gifts and their traditions. And then she says, well, hey, students, Cap here doesn't celebrate Tres Reyes. And so he, in Spanish, had to defend his Judaism. They all started peppering him with questions. Do you get gifts? Do you believe in God? Do you have his Christmas tree? On and on and on. And he did an amazing job. He answered everything. And
at 12 years old.
He was 12. A week later, a boy came up to him and in Spanish thought he was being funny and said, and in Spanish told him a joke and said, what's the difference between a Jew and a pizza? And it said, a pizza doesn't scream when it's put in the oven, was the punchline. And he thought it was hysterical, and he was trying to, I think, ingratiate himself and become friends with Cap. It was a bizarre, ignorant thing. So Cap said, well, first of all, we weren't put in the ovens alive. We were gassed and then we were burned. So that's incorrect historically. And then he said, and it's not funny. So that was Cap's answer. I was so proud of him. But of course, Cap didn't tell us for at least a month. He was afraid I would call the school and have a fit. And I didn't call the school. But the point is, it is hugely based on ignorance there. And I think curiosity and sort of hearing the party line from the parents, and not understanding anything historically. And we're seeing a parallel to that today with a lot of the social media posts going on about the Israeli-Gaza conflict here in America, where people are naive and they are just reposting and they do not understand the complexity. So I do feel like I can't wait for my book to come out in Spanish, because I can't wait for people to learn more and really, really understand what happened and not have it be
like you're saying, I think is important for the English-speaking market as well. I mean, there's so much history there and so much interaction between the peoples and understanding really what the Inquisition did. I mean, yesterday we had a talk by Jeannie Milgram, where she was saying the smallest things you could do to get put in the dungeon and be tortured, and you kind of allude to it without getting into gory detail. So I'm going to switch now, since so you made Isabella a poetess, and I want to. So first of all, you brought up Casmuma, and that's just one of these. I also personally connect to the concept of there were powerful, or there were at least educated and strong women throughout history, and we tend to think of women being property, and yet even if they were property, they still had a voice often. And so I love the fact that Isabella has a mentor or somebody she can look up to as a strong woman. But in terms of the poetry itself, do you have a personal connection to poetry, or was there a reason?
So I'll explain to those who haven't read the book. Casmuna is an 11th century or 12th century, in the 1100s, poet, Jewish, who wrote and spoke in Arabic, which was the dominant language at the time when Spain was under Muslim rule. And I came upon her in the Jewish Women's Archive doing research, and they got the information from the Cairo Geniza, which is a storage cache that archaeologists found in Cairo, because you can't burn or destroy any book with the word of God, and so Jews would store all their books, and also in there were letters and information of daily life of Jewish women. So she also was mentioned in the Cairo Geniza. So Casmuna, I made her an ancient relative of Isabel's, so that Isabel could look up to her, because Isabel wants to be a poet. And one thing that the Cairo Geniza also showed me was that Jewish women were lettered. They read and they wrote, which was very unusual. And so after the expulsion, Jewish women continued to write back to friends and family that were still in Spain. Family that had converted, that had become Christian. So this was women in the diaspora writing back. But I also learned from my book on Trujillo and looking at the court cases that women took over their husbands' ledgers if they passed away, and continued to run the business. So Jewish women, by and large, were educated, and they were taught by their fathers. Casmuna was most likely taught to be a poet by her poet father, not poetess, that's a female, but they didn't go to school, the women, but they could sit in on tutorial sessions and school sessions with their brothers, and if the father was willing, they could learn. So Abuela is a big character. Isabel's grandmother, she is taught to read and write by her father, who's a rabbi. It skips a generation, so Isabel's own parents don't teach her to read and write, because they are now more assimilated into the converso world, which was run by the nobles, and lettered women were looked down upon. As Spain started conquering the Muslim cities and ruling, and the Reconquista ruling more of Spain, reading and writing and education became less valued for women. So Isabel learns it in the basement, which is their secret area, and her grandmother teaches her to read and write in Spanish and in Hebrew, and then she can end up doing her father's ledgers for the wine business. So during the convivencia, which was the era where the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians all lived more or less harmoniously. There were tensions, but this was in more of like the year 900 to 1400. When Muslims ruled Spain, when Islam ruled Spain, there was education, was valued. And so I wanted Isabel to be a vestige of that era, and show, how a female could be strong. And so there are feminism themes in here. And, I hope that they resonate with modern day women to know that even back then, you could still, you had to fight for your place, but you could still have it.
Well, and you talk about the that she had this in her, and she also had the men that were supporting her, which I thought was also beautiful, in that she had Diego, and Diego himself was an artist. So can you talk a little bit about how that helped develop the relationship, a visual artist together with a poetess?
Yeah, so Diego, her romantic interest is the son of a nobleman. He's a count in training. He'll be a count. When you're an old Christian like his family, you do not court nor even socialize with conversos. She had tainted blood in his eyes and in his family's eyes. So, but I needed to have him be a rebel as well, and to try to make him go away from the fold and what was expected of him, because that would bring he and Isabel together. In fact, their first chance meeting is at the bookbinders, where he is fascinated by the illuminated manuscripts because he wants to be a painter. So his father wants him to be a tax collector and an aristocrat, and take over the family estate and take over his father's position as a nobleman in the government. Diego is fascinated by this idea of Renaissance. The Renaissance movement was just starting to happen in Italy, but he loves painting and he wants to apprentice with an artist. And so when he goes to the bookbinders, the Jewish bookbinders, to see the latest illuminated manuscripts that are unfortunately being taken out of the city and sent to Salonika and other Jewish places outside of Spain to keep them safe, Isabel is there at the same time asking the Jewish bookbinder, can you help me translate this poem by Cosmuna, my relative? So that became this synergy for the two of them. And because Diego is interested in the Enlightenment, he's a reader, he's a scholar, and he's a philosopher, and he actually reads Maimonides and knows about it, and Isabel does not. And so he's telling her, almost heretical ideas about God and about creation. And then she's also simultaneously learning that with her abuela as they study Talmud. So it's just this meeting of the minds that actually makes them fall in love. I mean, of course he's handsome, and of course she's beautiful. This is a romance novel, obviously, but there's so much more to them that they each fall in love with in the other.
I'm curious how you chose the Talmud. Like you said, she learned to read Hebrew, she learned to read Spanish, and yet you chose a book that's mostly in Aramaic. What was your reason for choosing the Talmud?
So, well, actually, it's not mostly in Aramaic. I learned from my rabbi that there's woven in Aramaic and Hebrew, and it's really hard to find the difference. And it's just, the language of the street versus the language of the sages and the scholars. But yes, I wanted, a Torah wouldn't be in someone's home at that time. That it was really that was kept safe in the synagogue. But a Talmud at that time was just starting to be written down. The Babylonian Talmud was being taken on horseback to these villages, and excuse me for that phone noise. So I thought, how could I justify having her physically touch it as a female, not being able to be in synagogue? And I also thought that since the Talmud really gives us the in-depth rules of how people behaved, and where the Torah would say, you take the four species during Sukkot, but it doesn't explain why we do that. And so I wanted to get into the why of it, and the why of being Jewish, not just the story of the Exodus or the story of our traditions, but I wanted to get into why we do this. And I felt like I could answer more of those questions Talmudically. And also it would be even more forbidden, because it wasn't Kabbalah, had mystical teachings that started in the 1300s in Spain. But I wanted it to have a feeling for the reader that she was doing something really, really forbidden, not just as a female, but even as a Jew. The Talmud was just this super, super special text.
And you mentioned as a Jew, although she herself is a new Christian, and yet they still maintained a relationship with the Jewish family. And
right.
why do you think they had the need to, or why did you create the need?
Well, I got that idea from the book Trujillo, because I saw that people were being detained by the Inquisition after they were seen walking into a Jewish home when they were conversos. And I thought, well, of course, you can't just stop friendships, once you convert. I have Jewish friends, I have non-Jewish friends, but I'm going to maintain those no matter what my belief system is. So I would think that these would be relationships that were deep and old and not easily stopped. So once I read that in Trujillo this was happening to families, I decided to make the Cohens an important family, and they were old friends of the Perezes. But then I thought about conflict, how great the conflict would be if the Perez family was pissed off. If the Cohens were pissed off at the Perezes for drinking the Kool-Aid, if you will, and doing the party line. So to me, that was this great way to show conflict, and that's why I did that. And initially, I actually had Yussi, who gives her the Talmud, who's a young boy with a crush on her. He was her love interest. He was much older. And then it became a love quadrangle between Diego, Yussi, Don Sancho, and Isabel. And my writing group said, no, you can't have a love quadrangle. You have to have a love triangle. So Yussi became 11 or 12 with a schoolboy crush, but it enabled him to be able to give her the Talmud, which was a huge plot point.
And at this point, I do encourage you, please, thank you, Susanna. I do encourage everybody, please, to open your microphones and your cameras. It's much nicer when we can see each other and talk. If you have a question, please feel free to open your microphone. I have plenty, so I'm going to keep going unless somebody, Susanna, please.
Well, just a comment, if I may. I've been to Spain twice. I went in 1992 because it was 1992.
Yes.
And I went about 25 years later. They were both marvelous, marvelous trips. I know somebody who's a Sephardi who said he can't go to Spain because he's too angry. I come from an Ashkenazi family, although I always felt an affinity for things Sephardic, and there may be some faint DNA. There's a story that before we were in Poland, that we were in Spain hundreds of years ago, but I can't prove it. But I've always felt it. But I also found that it was like an act of spiritual resistance. I stood in front of the office of the Inquisition. I don't remember which city it was in, and I said, "I'm here, and you're not."
It makes me cry.
Yeah, and in Cordoba we went to La Mezquita. So there in La Mezquita there is a working church still, and I went in there, and under my breath, I didn't have the guts to do it out loud. I kept singing Siete Hijos over and over again.
Oh, you're making me get the chills. So the Mezquita, for people who don't know, is in Cordoba, and it's a church that was put over a mosque. and it is stunning. And it's now a working church.
Well, it's a museum. It's huge. It holds thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, but people worship
And,
there, and
and there's
you can
one section that's a working church.
yes, you can tour it. It's very, very powerful. I felt that way in Toledo also, because there's a synagogue that became a church. And so you see the Hebrew writings.
Yeah.
And actually, Jews for Jesus, believe it or not, meet there. And so it's a really strange, fascinating thing where they incorporate Old Testament and New Testament. But anyway, I love that act of defiance. I think that, the Spanish Civil War invokes that in some Spaniards as well, where people who were on the wrong side of Franco, who were quiet, now, you families within the same family were on different sides of the revolution. And so sometimes you just don't bring it up. But I think with the Inquisition, the people that we met were very interested in knowing about us as Jews and about their own history. And many people I met, I bet if they did 23andMe would have would have some Sephardic blood in them. They just had that Jewish vibe. But I will say that finding the remnants is a very special, affirming thing. And if your friend ever did go back, there are enough places now that I could even give a list that you can actually see evidence, and it's pretty thrilling to say we were here. You can't get rid of us.
Okay, I'm going to ask another one. You chose to put them in a small town instead of Toledo or Cordoba or any of the others. Do you want to talk a little bit about why?
So I thought about setting it closer to 1492 or even after 1492, but I wanted the reader and the characters to be discovering the Inquisition at the same time together. And so a small town would have not heard about the Inquisition in the same way that a big town, the capital was Toledo, or Valencia, or even Madrid, where there would be royals always there would be military presence. And so the small town was kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And people had this false sense of security and this, somewhat blasé, like, I'm going to be a converso, but I'm going to be friends with my Jewish old friend. And I'm gonna dare to celebrate Shabbat, and that'll never happen in our town. And I'm gonna continue to not eat pork, and I'm gonna light candles, and I'm gonna fast, and I'm gonna do these things that I've always done, because that's only happening in the bigger cities. So the small town was the last to really know, in a way, and that's why. And I just liked that everyone was friends with everybody. Everybody knew what was going on. In the bigger cities, there were pogroms. That word pogrom wasn't used, but there were there was destruction, and there were riots, and there were acts of violence against Jews, much more than in these small towns. They had like petty things, individual one-on-one things. But I just thought it was much more interesting and shocking for Isabel and the reader to sort of see this burgeoning, frightening Inquisition coming.
And I'll open if anybody else has a question, because we're getting to our end here, so I don't want to monopolize.
I'll show you the
book. Yes, please.
It's available everywhere you get books. It's also on Kindle. I love to support the indie bookstores, but of course it's on Amazon. And you can visit my website to see more, CambriaGordon.com. And I just really thank you for
put
coming.
That in the chat?
Yeah. You know how? Or...
Dora, do you want me to do it?
Yeah, if you can do it, that's fine.
Sure, I'll put in my website.
It'll also come in the follow-up email. So.
Oh, good. And I love doing book clubs. If any of you have a book club or know a teen that may want me to come speak to their school, it's a crossover. I mean, it's most of my readers are adults, but it is marketed from Scholastic. It was published by Scholastic, and they have a really great school presence. So I want as many teens to read it, to learn about this, to learn about our history, and it's an entertaining way to learn about our history. I think there's a lot of books about the Holocaust, but there aren't so much about the Inquisition.
I have
About the greater Jewish
Where do
experience.
you live in Los Angeles?
Oh, Rachel, I live in a little town called Pacific Palisades, and it's between Santa Monica and Malibu.
I know where it is. Yeah, I know where it is. Yes, because I live out in Oak Park.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh, I'm doing an event at it's called Valley Outreach Synagogue.
Oh, in Calabasas.
In Calabasas. I'm speaking there in June.
Oh, I'd love to come to it.
Oh yeah, it's on my website, and I think if you go to their website, they have a book club, so you have to join their book club, and then I'm speaking on the last day. They meet every week and talk about sections of the book, and then I'll do a speech at the end.
Oh,
That's
I
great.
see. Well, I belong to a book club too, so that's why I'm asking where you were in LA.
Yeah, I go.
Okay.
I love to go in person just because I'm vaccinated, and it's exciting to actually see people. But I'm so grateful to you, Drora, because just to be able to have people in Israel see this is so meaningful. And we're trying to sell the foreign rights in Hebrew and Spanish, Italian, and South America. So that's in the works, but it hasn't happened yet. So fingers crossed that it'll be available in Hebrew.
Definitely. It's something that should be in all those languages. Definitely in Hebrew too, and Spanish.
Portuguese?
And Portuguese, for sure. I mean, I think the publisher would do both countries. Whoever we find will do Spain and Portugal. And of course, there's a big section where my character goes to Portugal.
Right.
And the Rocio, in Rocio Square, the massacre is a plot point.
Yeah.
I moved it up a few years, but that is just a very moving, terrible event that happened that I learned about when we were living there.
Yeah, I'd love to go back to Lisbon. But my last trip, we were out. The first time I was there was no monument to that massacre. The second time I was there was. We didn't go into the church because there were people on the trip that didn't want to go into the church. But I was thinking to myself, I want to go back there and sing Siete Hijos inside that church.
You have to, or at least sing it next to the monument, because our tour guide is the one who cleans the graffiti from that monument.
Uh-huh.
He takes it upon himself to take care of it.
Wow.
And he probably knows that song.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Thank you very, very much. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you for coming. And thank you for those who are watching at home afterwards. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Drora.